Hello there, welcome to Positive Changes, a Self-Kick podcast. I'm your host, Shelley F. Knight. I'm a former nurse and clinical hypnotherapist, turned podcaster and author of Positive Changes, a Self-Kick book, and Good Grief, the A to Z approach of modern day grief healing. In each episode, I aim to share my clinical, spiritual and personal experience to help you feel inspired to create your own positive changes in life. Fear not, it's not just me. Each week I will bring on a new guest and they will share their authentic story of positive change and the tools that they used on their journey. So if you're ready to be inspired, let's go. Welcome back. Just to keep you on your toes, this week the story of positive changes began with our guest observing a positive change in his father's life, which in turn led him to creating his own positive changes. Steve Burgess's career shifted from publishing to hypnotherapy, where he then went on to study past life regression, a way in which he helps people create their own positive changes.
The cause of all of our problems as human beings are locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. When we release those traumas, when we release those feelings, the angers, the sadness, the anxiety, the fear, the guilt that we hold on to as human beings in our energy field, then we get better. It's very simple.
So if you're ready, let's meet Steve and learn how past life regression can help create positive changes. Today on the show, we are joined by Steve Burgess, and Steve is a hypnotherapist, past life regression specialist, and an author. He's been a hypnotherapist for nearly 3 decades, seeing over 15,000 past life regression clients. He's also author of 2 books, Famous Past Lives with O Books and The Power of Past Life Regression, which just start that again. One job, Shelley. Let's go again from the top. My head is going to be like, really? Today on the show, we're joined by Steve Burgess. Steve is a hypnotherapist, a past life regression specialist, and an author. Steve's had hypnotherapy going for now 3 decades, seeing over 15,000 past life regression clients. He's author of 2 books, Famous Past Lives with O Books and The Power of Past Life Regression with 6 books, all available from John Hunt Publishing. So with that, let's say hello to Steve.
Hi, Shelley. Thanks for having me.
Bless you. Loving the bio. 3 decades as a hypnotherapist and past life regression specialist. You've been a busy man.
Yeah, I've been around a long time. I'm a hypnotherapy old lag, we would say.
Bless you. So it's a little bit different today because normally the show's all about people come on and they've had a life-changing event and then they share how they created their positive change. But yours actually relates to other people. So let's dive back into how it all began for you.
Okay, I was a director of a publishing company over 30 years ago, which went bust, and I had to sort of think about doing something rather quickly. My father stopped smoking using hypnotherapy, and he said, well, why don't you look at being a hypnotherapist? Basically, my father was a scientist by profession, and he couldn't understand why he'd been to see this man. He tried everything to stop smoking. He went to see a man who laid him in a comfortable chair, relaxed him, and told him he could let go of cigarette smoking now. And my dad didn't want a cigarette anymore. And he couldn't understand this. It didn't make sense. You know, he was a scientist. His left brain didn't compute. So he started to read about hypnosis. And the more he read, the more fascinated he became. Eventually, he went and trained to be a hypnotherapist and started practicing privately at home as a hobby. And so he said, well, why don't you have a bash at hypnotherapy? I thought, okay, well, we'll see where it goes. And it was wonderful in a way because it was like coming home for me. You know, I often find some people are naturally talented as therapists. I would call them natural therapists. And I was very lucky. I think I'm a natural therapist, and it just felt it was like putting on a pair of comfortable gloves when I became a therapist.
absolutely love that. I love the fact your dad was a scientist. I always love those sort of like naysayers when you said, like, it's almost like, why can't I smoke, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, as being a hypnotherapist yourself, it's amazing when people stop smoking and then they think, I don't get this. For 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, I've been smoking, and now it doesn't come into my head anymore. What's going on? And that's just the wonderful power of hypnotherapy, of course.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And you're the same as me. So I started out as a clinical hypnotherapist. But if I'm honest, Steve, I only did it because I wanted to do what people consider the woo-woo stuff. I wanted to do the past life regression.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer that we're more than the physical body, our current reality, and things like that. So I was a little bit feisty. So what was your transition to take you from the clinical hypnotherapist into the past life regression specialist that you are now?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable, really, because I'd been practicing for about 6 months, doing what I call standard hypnosis, just taking people into trance and feeding the subconscious with positive suggestions to change. And then one day, after about 6 months, this young lad came in his early 20s to see me with a severe anxiety state. And I mean, he really was in a bad state. He sat in front of me in the chair. He was shaking. He was hyperventilating. He was stuttering and stammering as he was talking to me. And I asked him, how long has it been like this for? He said, well, all my life I've been anxious, but over the last few years since the children came along, this just got, and he's stuttering like this, got worse and worse and worse. And he was breathing fast. And he said, my wife, he said, I just sit at home all day now. I had to give my job up. I can't work. I'm sitting in a chair shaking all day long. The doctors give me medication, which of course usually makes things worse. And it did make things worse for him. He said, my wife's sick of it. If I don't get better, she said she's going to leave me. And that's obviously putting more pressure on him. But there was no cause to this. And, as therapists, we often say, so what's happened in your life in the last 2 or 3 years to cause this? There was nothing. So I guided him into trance, took him into a gentle trance state, and he started to relax. His breathing was slow and deep. His body was soft in the reclining chair. And I'm thinking, okay, this is just a standard hypnotherapy session now. I'll guide him a bit deeper. I'll feed his subconscious with positive suggestions about changing. And then after about 5 minutes, all of a sudden, his whole body started to shake as he lay in the chair. And he started to shake and gasp, and suddenly he started to talk out loud. And he was talking to somebody else that he was seeing in his imagination. And he's saying, no, hide in here, quickly, hide, bring the children, hide in here, quickly, quiet, 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 quiet. And then all of a sudden, Shelley, his whole body started to shake. He was writhing and he was screaming at the top of his voice, no, no, don't shoot. No, not the children. No. Ah. Bleh. And he just was flat in the chair, completely flat. And my heart was beating. What on earth is this? So I said, how do you feel? He said, oh, I feel wonderful. I feel absolutely wonderful. I've never felt this calm in my life before. That's amazing. I just feel fantastic. I thought, well, I don't. It's such a shock for me. I said, what was happening? What were you experiencing? He said, it was weird. It was like I was in another body in another time. And I was a man, and my wife and children, we were hiding from soldiers. I think they were Nazis. And we tried to hide, and then they found us and they shot us all. And I died. He said, what was that? What was going on? I said, well, I think you've been into a past lifetime. And he basically spontaneously regressed in the past life. And you've obviously died in the past life. How do you feel now? And he said, I just feel wonderful. Do you know, Shelley, his problem was cured in 10 minutes. And that hit me in the face. I thought, I need to know about this. Why don't I know about this? This is important. So I started to get information from America, the American Past Life Association. And then I developed working with past lives over 29 years. And I've now got my own structured system of past life regression that works for virtually every issue. Not every issue, but virtually every issue that a client can come with potentially has its causes in the past, and especially in past lives. So that was how that gentleman brought me into this amazing, incredible world of past life therapy.
I love that. I mean, I love the story of your dad giving up smoking through hypnotherapy, but I do love a little bit of, past life catharsis, if I'm honest, Steve.
Yes. And we do
Don't-
see that sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can be remarkable. I mean, sometimes people in past lives are screaming, yelling, writhing, but they are releasing the problem when they're doing that, and they get better. So, do you want another story about a lady who came to me with back pain?
yeah.
She had a back pain, lower back pain. She'd had it for years. She couldn't get rid of it. She even had surgery. And basically, they took her into hospital, opened her up. They couldn't find anything wrong, stitched her back up, and sent her home with painkillers. But the pain continued to get worse. And she got to the stage where she got depression because of it. She was overeating. She was unhappy. She couldn't go to the gym. And, life was awful. And she was also she's a magistrate in this lifetime, so she's not some sort of spiritual woo-woo person as we are. She's not, doesn't suffer fools gladly. But when I took her into trance, her subconscious indicated that there were 4 past lives causing the back problem, and the first past life was the most dramatic. And in this, she was a young Nazi officer in the Second World War. And bear in mind that, she didn't come to me for past life therapy. She wanted a back fixing, but she was laid in trance and she was recounting what she was seeing in her mind's eye as she was experiencing it. And this young man, this young Nazi officer, was part of a Nazi war team that was going around Europe stealing art treasures and shipping them back to Berlin. And that was all okay. But then this young man gets sent to the Eastern Front in Russia and was then fighting, the Russians in the snow. And what she then said is, we're about 40 miles from Moscow. And I think she said April 1942. And she said, we're stuck. We can't move anymore now. We're not getting the supplies through. We're not getting the petrol. The trucks are stuck. We're stuck in the snow. There's snipers all over the place. There's skirmishes. And this young man was terrified. He was really scared. And she was laying in the chair, very scared. But then what happened? This young man made the biggest mistake of his life, because he was told that in a church, in a village behind the lines, so in a village that the Germans had captured, there was an icon in a church, and it may be worth stealing. So he thought, okay, it's behind our lines. He jumps on a motorbike without an escort and went on his own to the church. And the next thing, and again, this was a really dramatic one, I said, what's happening now? And she said, well, I've arrived at the church, and I've got off the bike and I'm looking for the entrance to the church. And then suddenly she screamed and leapt about 3 feet, a meter in the air, and crashed back down in the chair, screaming and writhing and coughing and moaning. And I said, what's happened? She said, I've been shot. I've been shot. And so then she took about 20 minutes to die. And basically a sniper had just shot her and gone off, left this young man to die. So she died in the snow. And we went back through that past life, that death, a few times to fully release it. And she came out of trance and was pretty amazed, as you can imagine. She came back a week or two later, and the back pain was probably about 70 to 80% better. It had virtually gone. We cleared the other past lives up fairly quickly, and we did a bit of work on the depression. She got her life back, and the back pain dissolved away as though it had never existed before.
Thank you so much for sharing. When you were saying about it, it took me back to my training, because you have to be regressed a lot, don't you? So we kept being regressed to clear out our stuff before we regress others. And so many people that I trained with had physical ailments, sort of like recurring breaking wrists, weak legs, even things like poverty had been through their past lives. They didn't feel worthy in this life. Yeah. And it is fascinating. It is almost like seeing is believing. But a lady on my course had like really bad rheumatoid arthritis in her wrist, like she couldn't wear like bracelets. She had the same on her feet, so she couldn't wear heels. And it healed as we healed ourselves to become therapists. You know, she had these little cute boots on, you know, she had the jewelry dangling. And so seeing is believing, isn't it?
Lovely. It is. It really is. And, you know, if this only happened occasionally, then you think, well, it may be an imaginary process or it could be placebo. But when it happens in thousands and thousands of cases for hypnotherapists, regression therapists around the world, there is something very significant going on as a result of regression.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you've done your 15,000 like you have, you've probably got very valid points to make.
I think so. Well, I mean, okay, it is a controversial subject, and I understand that. Even in our profession as hypnotherapists, you know, there are some therapists who won't give it time of day, who say, oh, it's all imagination. But I'll be honest, I don't think they have lived it and seen it as I have. You know, if they sat watching my client cases, I used to say my office, but online nowadays, because I do everything online, they would change the tune. Because when you see the incredible experiences people have, and then when you get the clients occasionally who in a past life come up with information which is historically verifiable, it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it takes your breath away. It just takes your breath away. And you think, well, these people wouldn't have known that. How did they know that? Because they were in the past life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's quite simple. And the regression model is simple. The cause of all of our problems as human beings are locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. When we release those traumas, when we release those feelings, the angers, the sadness, the anxiety, the fear, the guilt that we hold on to as human beings in our energy field, then we get better. It's very simple.
Yeah. And I think even in this life, I always say that when we go through something, we have sort of like the emotional memory, when we do that storytelling again and again and again, but there's also the physical memory. So whatever we go through, you know, then resonates through our body. So I totally agree, you know, current life, past life and all that.
Yes.
As we're
yes.
saying, we love it. We did clinical hypnotherapy, then went on to past life regression therapists. So I've got a woo-woo answer of my own, Steve, but I was going to ask for the listeners out there, how do people come to you? I would think that they just like your face or your name would pop up somewhere, but you know, we're in a very Western world where, you know, it's the medicine, the surgery, the investigations, but people find their way to us. Do you know what I mean? People come like that very anxious man who then, you know, was anxious since having children in this life because he'd lost his children dramatically and traumatically in the past life. So how do people, do you think, come to be with us to have therapy on past lives?
I think one reason, you know, Shelley, is because the world has changed so much over the past 15 to 20 years. So I remember 29 years ago when I first started having to justify hypnotherapy to people. It was still new. Even in the UK, it was still new. But now everybody knows it works. It's been on TV for so long. There are so many hypnotherapists. There's been an explosion of hypnotherapists over the last 20 years in the West. People know it works. So you don't have to justify it anymore. So whereas in the old days, it was sort of, well, we'll give it a try. Now it's okay. It's like a mainstream therapy or mainstream complementary therapy. And I think people are ready for it. Strangely enough, I mean, I've been running hypnotherapy training in Norway for about 10 years now, and I was living in Norway for a few years. And it's Norway is where we were 30 years ago in the UK with hypnotherapy. It's all very new there. It's all unusual. It's all a bit freaky, a bit, people think it's paranormal. You know, I mean, we know, I mean, hypnosis is so natural. We all go into trance about 24 times a day naturally. So, you know, there's nothing to worry about with hypnotherapy. It's just so, it's a natural state that we all enter. But of course, Norway is sort of coming around slowly. But I think the reason is it's so well known nowadays. And, you know, we don't have to hide our light under a bushel anymore or justify it or pretend that we're some sort of alternative therapy. No, we're not. We're complementary therapists. And in fact, if Freud had focused on hypnotherapy when he was creating his theories, because he played with hypnotherapy for a while and was basically rubbish at it, and tried something else. And then that something else became psychoanalysis, became the standard psychotherapeutic tool, if you like, in the West. If Freud had gone down the hypnotherapy route, this would now be mainstream therapy.
Yeah, I love that, because I remember when I was doing my training, they said that he was about to be groundbreaking, but apparently he had not the best of bedside manners, if we're honest, Steve, is what I'm trying to say. So apparently he didn't really have that sort of like the hypnotic suggestion, the gentle, you are safe, no loss of control kind of thing. And so apparently he didn't have the bedside manner, which I'm sure some doctors still struggle with to this day.
Oh,
And
very
that's,
much so.
then we went on to then have to fight decades to have people like you come through.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
little new age Freud.
I mean, there are some GPs and doctors who do hypnosis. Unfortunately, they tend to only do a weekend training course in it and then pretend that they can do hypnosis. Whereas, of course, most of us have trained for much longer than that. So, but it's accepted now, and that's the most important thing. I have a lot of GPs referring patients to me. In fact, recently I had a GP refer her daughter to me with trichotillomania, hair
Oh, the
pulling.
hair pulling. Yeah.
Mm. And so she came to me for help, and the causes of that were primarily in her ancestors' lives. So traumas in her ancestors' lives, not past lives, but ancestral lives. So that's another form of regression that we use. And so GPs are happy with it nowadays.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's my kind of world, Steve, is what I'm trying to say, really.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you know what I mean? Because not one size fits all. So I love the
that's
fact
a good
that
point.
becoming more open.
Yeah.
So when people do come to you, I know like anxiety is a huge part of society today. So you've said about this gentleman with anxiety, the lady with pain, and they are very Western medicine, why we would go to the doctor. But what about other things that affect our quality of life? Things like, fear around relationships and commitment, or self-doubt, lack of confidence. Tell us some stories around that.
Very much so. I mean, lack of confidence is a big thing nowadays for many people, many women especially. A lack of confidence is caused by fear. Somebody who has fear inside them often lacks confidence in the world. So the question is, where does the fear come from? And it's always caused by locked-in feelings and emotions from past traumas, the regression model. And it often is past lives. I mean, let me give you an example. I had a lad came to me who was about 18 years old, and he had a severe lack of confidence. And he said, in fact, as he sat in front of me in my office in those days, he just wouldn't make eye contact. He just kept looking down at the floor. And he said, I'm just scared all the time. He said, I work in an office. He said, I just sit in the corner. I don't speak to anybody all day long. They give me work to do. I don't look at them. He said, they all think I'm weird. He said, I'm not weird. He said, I'm just really scared. So I took him into trance, and his subconscious took him to the cause of the fear, which was a past lifetime where he was being executed in front of a crowd. So a lot of past life therapy is about releasing death trauma from past lives. And this was a standard death trauma. So he basically was being executed with some of his colleagues in some sort of crime, what was seen as a crime. And he had to watch his friends and colleagues being put to death first because he was the ringleader before he was executed by having his head chopped off. And of course, he was scared, and he was scared while he went through that. But I killed him in the chair. He came out of trance at the end and was really very shocked. And he came back to see me a week later, 2 weeks later, and he was like a different man. He was a different person altogether. He walked into my office with his shoulders back. He looked me in the eye. He said, I just feel amazing. He said, I cannot thank you enough. So a lack of confidence is a standard problem that we can work with. Relationship issues nearly always have past life energies in them in some way, because we've been around each other so many times. If we're in significant others, people who were in relationship with in a significant way, parents, family, husbands, wives, etc., lovers, we've been around them probably several times, if not many times, in past lives. And we often bring the energies in from the past lives into this lifetime. So it may be that a husband and wife are having difficulties. And of course, yes, they can bring in their emotional baggage from this lifetime, because we all do that, unfortunately. But there's often past life stuff under the surface. So it may be, for example, that the woman is struggling with the husband who's always picking at her, always nitpicking, always sniping at her. There's an underlying anger to him. And the woman sort of thinks, well, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything wrong. And she does her best to, overcompensate for this man who's a bit of not exactly a bully, but there's this tension there. And then we may find in a past life that actually she's killed him in a past life. So his subconscious has got a resentment towards her in this life, and that it comes out in the form of sort of general sniping. So we release that past life and everything settles down in the relationship.
Yeah, is that like soul group? Because I know like my husband, my mum, my dad, my ex, my mother-in-law, my children, I know from the work I've done that they've been with me in past lives. So when you're talking about, sort of like the bickering couple now, we're probably a bickering couple or brother and sister before. And that's like the soul family where we just come back and keep learning lessons in different kind of roles.
That's it. Yeah, it's said that there are clusters of souls. So when we die, we move off, our soul moves off into spirit, and often we then go to heal. But these clusters of souls, it's like a big group of souls. The ones on the outside of the group are less significant in most of our lives. The ones closest to us, if we're the center soul in that group, those closest to us are the ones that we keep reincarnating with in significant ways, often over many lifetimes. And that's the concept of it. Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
But what I want to say, though, is because I know there's a lot of your listeners are going to be thinking, this is spiritual bull. Like people who just will not accept this. And what I would say to those people that, this is not some sort of spiritual woo-woo philosophy. I've spent 29 years now promoting regression and past life regression as a credible psychotherapeutic discipline. It doesn't need any spiritual sort of essence to it. It is a very powerful therapeutic tool. And a person doesn't have to believe in past lives to actually get something out of it. They really don't. In fact, many of my clients come to me with no knowledge of past lives. I've company directors come to me, and top business people who are, their world is nothing to do with this sort of spiritual world. But the subconscious says, this is past life. I don't know it is. I ask the subconscious and it tells me. And then we follow that through. So, this is not just some sort of like spiritual nonsense. This is a very powerful psychotherapeutic tool.
Yeah, and it's important what you say, that you don't have to believe in past life regression. You don't have to be religious or anything, because my husband's none of the above, and I've regressed him. And it's quite funny because he's like, well, I'll humour you, dear. Yes, let me do it. And then they just naturally go. You say it's the subconscious, we're more than the physical body. But I loved when I was doing my training, I was working with the most gorgeous woman, and she went to practice on her mum. And she's like, well, I don't believe in it. Where are you going to put me? And she goes, well, if you don't believe me, you're not going to go anywhere, love, are you? But you think, people think you zoom off to another dimension, but you're just here. I mean, like I hypnobirthed both our girls.
Right. Yeah.
You have control throughout all of it. It's just another part of you that you're not using.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, going on from that is some people are naturally very good at hypnosis. So about 25 to 30% of people are very good naturally at hypnosis. They have an ability to go into trance, which is fantastic. And with those people, then this is made for them. Anybody who is very good at hypnosis, hypnotherapy is a fantastic healing tool. It fixes most things for them. But yeah, it doesn't have to be living. I had a lady came to me with depression, severe depression. I mean, she was in a terrible state. She couldn't hardly get out of bed. Most of her life was spent on the sofa, just feeling unhappy. And, she didn't come to me for past life regression. She came because she had depression and she's stuck in life. There were 8 past lives causing the depression. And we worked in those over several sessions. And after each session, as we released each past life, she got better and better and better. And she had no concept of this. She found in one past life, she was a Victorian flower seller who was extremely poor, undernourished, got sick. One day is feeling so sick, she drags herself off the streets to a doctor who was a bit of a quack doctor. He then raped her and murdered her in the past life. So we released that past life. There's another past life where she had a little boy as a son, and the little boy died, and she could never come to terms with the loss of that boy. There was another past life where she was a soldier, because obviously we can change sex from life to life. And she was a soldier in the past life who was a coward and ran off and then felt incredibly guilty. So she carried that guilt through. So all of these experiences, and she didn't come to me thinking, well, I know, I'll go and see Burgess to get better and I'll make up some past life stories. No. These came quite spontaneously. And after every session, she got better and better. We cleared all the 8 past lives. She was not depressed anymore.
Yeah, and it takes us back to like the start of the episode. Like you kind of discovered it when that really anxious young dad came along. He didn't come for past life regression. He just come because he had no quality of life, if I'm honest.
Yes.
I think you were as surprised as he was, if we're honest.
I was shocked. I really was.
Yeah. So, whilst I love the spiritual thing, I love the spiritual aspect, it is absolutely a clinical tool. I'll say, like, I use hypnotherapy to birth my girls.
Yes.
We both know that it works. So yeah, whether you're into the spiritual or the non-believer, it's still a tool that works.
Yes, and that's a wonderful thing. I had a lady who came to me years ago. She'd been given 6 months to live, and she was an ex-police officer. She had tumours growing on her liver, and a specialist just eventually gave up. He didn't know what to do. And so we worked on the emotional causes of the tumours on the liver. They weren't cancer tumours. They were benign tumours, but they grew to the size of grapefruits and melons. So she was in constant pain all the time, couldn't eat, lost loads of weight, and she was in a terrible state. And we found that there were 2 past lives causing at heart the problem with the liver. And we released both the past lives. In one past life, she was a Native American woman who was stabbed by a raiding party, stabbed in the liver and died. In the other past life, she was a young man in the Second World War, bayoneted in the lower back in the liver area and died. We released those. Subsequently, we even did surgery in hospital, major surgery without any anesthetic, with a piece of surgery that tried twice before and it had failed. So I was with her all the time in the operating theatre. We did hypnosurgery. It was a massive success. That lady is now 24 years past her die-by date. So, this stuff is not sort of pretend therapy. This is real, meaty, in-depth therapy.
I think 24 years post death date is a pretty good testimonial, if I'm honest.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So your second book, The Power of Past Life Regression, does that have tools in for people, or is it the stories? What's the book about?
It's the stories. It's the stories of how past life therapy has helped people with such a range of problems. It's their experiences in the past lives, what they said, how they felt. Much of these stories that I'm sharing with you today, and how it healed them from, this wide range of problems. So it's all about the stories in regression and how they got better.
See, I love a book about positive changes. That sounds fabulous.
Yes.
So they can go out there, buy the book, read the book, and be inspired by the stories within. But what about people that are listening today? What one positive change could they do today around moving on from these blocks?
Okay. And most of us have blocks. Most of us have got stuck things which we want fixing. What I usually advise people to do, and I like people to do, is to check out my free YouTube channel, which is Hypno for All, HYPNO, the number 4 ALL. It's 21 free hypnotherapy recordings, and all of them are professionally recorded for a wide range of problems. So there's recordings on there to release anxiety, to build confidence, for hypnosis for childbirth, stopping smoking, weight loss, irritable bowel syndrome, stuff like that. And they're all free. So for me, go and enjoy some free hypnotherapy. If you've already done hypnosis and you know how good it is, well, enjoy some more. If you're new to hypnotherapy, then this is a nice introduction, a nice gentle way to use the power of the subconscious.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've absolutely loved today's episode. I know I love the clinical and the spiritual, just so happened to have written a book about that myself. So I just love it because, as I say, one size doesn't fit all. And so sometimes you need the clinical, sometimes you need the spiritual. And I think this is a perfect bridge personally. So Steve Burgess, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shelley. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you subscribe and leave a positive review. If you would like to create your own positive changes, you can buy Positive Changes, a self-kick book from all online book retailers or from shelleyfknight.com. If you need a dollop of positivity until the next episode, come like and follow us over on Facebook at Shelley F. Knight, Life Goes On. As always, I've been Shelley F. Knight and you've been amazing.